Welcome to the Korean Mafia romance stories. The channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. The night I was shot in a gang war, a woman I had never met pressed her hands against my chest and refused to let me die. At the time she had no idea who I was. To her I was just another bleeding man brought through the doors of a small clinic in the middle of the night. She did not know that the man fighting to stay conscious on her examination table controlled half of the Korean underworld in the city. My name is Seo Hyun-woo. In business records I am the owner of a network of import and export companies that move thousands of containers through the port every month. The paperwork is clean and the offices are legitimate. But people who live close to the darker corners of the city know a different version of my name. They know the man who settles disputes, protects territory, and makes sure certain rules are never broken inside the Korean underworld. That night everything went wrong at the container yard near the harbor. The meeting with a rival group was supposed to be simple. We had negotiated dozens of times before without bloodshed. But someone on their side came prepared for war. The first gunshot cracked through the air before anyone finished speaking. Chaos followed immediately. Men scattered between rows of metal containers while bullets echoed across the empty docks. I remember the burning shock in my chest before I even realized I had been hit. A second impact struck my shoulder and knocked the air out of me. My bodyguards dragged me behind a stack of cargo crates while returning fire, their voices shouting over the noise. I could feel warm blood soaking through my shirt as they pushed me into the back seat of a black car and sped away from the harbor. By the time we reached the edge of the city the world around me had begun to fade in and out like a broken signal. My driver kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror, his face tight with fear. "Boss, you need a hospital," he said more than once. But hospitals meant questions and police reports. We could not risk that. Instead he turned down a narrow street and stopped in front of a small clinic that kept its lights on through the night. I remember the door swinging open and bright white light flooding the car. Two men helped drag me inside while someone shouted for a nurse. That was when I first saw Danielle Brooks. She stepped forward without hesitation, her dark hair tied back and her expression calm despite the blood covering my shirt. She looked directly at the wound on my chest, then at my face, measuring the situation in seconds the way experienced medical workers do. "Lay him down," she said firmly. My bodyguards hesitated, unsure whether to trust a stranger. Danielle did not wait for permission. She pressed clean cloth against the wound and applied pressure with steady hands that did not shake. Pain shot through my chest, but her voice cut through the fog in my head as she worked. She asked who had done this. I did not answer. Talking would have revealed too much. She simply continued treating the injury, stitching and cleaning while ordering supplies from another nurse across the room. Hours passed in fragments of memory. The bright lamp above me, the smell of antiseptic, the steady rhythm of Danielle's voice telling me to stay awake. Somehow she managed to stop the bleeding long enough for my men to move me again. Before I was carried out of the clinic I looked at her one last time. She met my eyes without fear and said something that stayed with me long after the pain faded. "You are lucky someone still wants you alive." At the time I did not realize that the woman who saved my life would soon become the most dangerous weakness I had ever known. I survived the night, though the doctors who treat me later say it should not have been possible. The bullet that entered my chest missed my heart by less than an inch. In my world survival often depends on luck as much as planning. But during the long days that follow my mind keeps returning to something far less dramatic than the gunfight. I keep remembering the woman in the clinic. Not the blood or the pain or the chaos around her. I remember the way she looked at me. Most people react to me in one of two ways. They are either afraid or they are eager to impress. Danielle Brooks did neither. She looked at me the same way she would look at any other patient. Direct. Focused. Completely uninterested in who I might be outside that room. A week passes while I recover in a private apartment my organization uses when someone needs to disappear for a while. The wound across my chest pulls painfully whenever I breathe too deeply, but the doctors assure me it will heal. My men bring reports about the attack at the harbor and the retaliation already unfolding across the city. I listen to everything they say, give instructions where necessary, and make sure the network continues operating exactly as it should. On the surface nothing about my life changes. Yet one thought keeps interrupting my concentration. The nurse who saved my life. One evening my Lieutenant Min Jae notices that I have stopped reading the reports in front of me. "Is the pain getting worse?" he asks. "No," I reply. "Then what is it?" I hesitate for a moment before answering. "The clinic." His expression sharpens immediately. "You think they will talk to the police?" "That is not what I meant." Min Jae studies me carefully. He has worked beside me long enough to recognize when something unusual is happening. Do you want me to send someone to handle it? I close the folder in front of me and shake my head. No. I want information. Within 24 hours my men know everything about Danielle Brooks. 32 years old. A nurse practitioner who works the night shift at a community clinic near the harbor. No criminal record, no connections to anyone in my world, and no history of financial problems that might make her easy to pressure. She lives alone in a modest apartment across town and spends most of her free time volunteering at a neighborhood health program. When Min Jae finishes listing the details he waits for further instructions. That is all? I ask. That is everything we could find. I nod slowly. The information tells me nothing about the one thing that interests me most. Why she helped me without hesitation. 2 days later I return to the clinic. I leave my bodyguard several blocks away and walk the rest of the distance alone. The small building looks exactly the same as it did the night I nearly died inside it. The waiting room smells faintly of disinfectant and old coffee. A tired-looking man sits in one corner holding a bag of ice against his wrist. When Danielle steps through the doorway leading from the treatment rooms she notices me immediately. For a brief second surprise crosses her face. Then she simply nods. You look better, she says. I step closer to the counter. You remember me. You were the man bleeding all over my floor. That is hard to forget. Her tone carries a hint of dry humor. I realize she still does not know who I am, and strangely enough I prefer it that way. I came to thank you, I say. You are welcome. The conversation ends there unless I continue it. Most people would try to use the moment to impress someone like me. Danielle returns to organizing medical supplies as if my presence in the room does not matter. Why did you help me? I ask. She glances up from the tray she is holding. Because you were injured. That is not what I mean. I know, she replies calmly. But that is still the answer. I study her for several seconds. You did not ask questions. I asked who did it. You chose not to answer. You did not call the police. You were bleeding too much for paperwork to matter. The simplicity of her reasoning confuses me. In my experience every action hides a motive. People do favors because they expect something in return. Danielle appears completely uninterested in that kind of transaction. You realize the men who brought me here were dangerous, I say. She shrugs lightly. Most people who arrive at 2 in the morning with gunshot wounds usually are. You were not afraid? Her eyes meet mine directly. Fear does not stop bleeding. For the first time since I entered the building I feel something close to amusement. The woman standing across from me speaks with the calm confidence of someone who has already decided exactly what kind of person she is. A patient in the waiting room coughs loudly, reminding her that work is still happening. Danielle steps around the counter and gestures toward a chair. If you are finished asking questions, you should probably sit down for a few minutes. People with injuries like yours sometimes pretend they are stronger than they are. I sit because arguing would only make the situation awkward. She checks the stitches across my chest with professional efficiency, adjusting the bandage and giving instructions about how long the wound should take to heal. The entire examination takes less than 5 minutes. When she finishes I stand and adjust my jacket. You saved my life, I tell her. You are alive, she replies. That means you did the hard part. As I walk toward the door she adds one last comment. You should avoid getting shot again. The words follow me out into the street. For reasons I cannot fully explain, I realize I want to see her again. The weeks after my visit to the clinic should have returned to normal. My organization was still repairing the damage from the attack at the harbor, and my attention should have been focused entirely on restoring control. Yet something unexpected happens. I begin thinking about Danielle Brooks more often than I should. Not in the way men in my world usually think about women. There is no calculation behind it, no strategy, no advantage to be gained. It is simple curiosity, and that alone makes it unusual. Most people who cross my path eventually learn who I am. Fear follows that knowledge quickly. But Danielle had looked at me with none of that. To her I was simply a patient who happened to survive a gunshot wound. That kind of indifference is rare in my life, and it lingers in my mind longer than I expect. Unfortunately the city does not remain quiet long enough for me to enjoy that distraction. The men responsible for the attack at the harbor are still looking for me. Their leader believes eliminating me will weaken my entire network. Normally threats like that end quickly once I respond with enough force. But this time something changes. One evening my Lieutenant Min Jae enters my office with an expression I recognize immediately. It is the look he wears when the situation becomes complicated. He closes the door behind him and places a photograph on the desk. They have been watching the clinic, he says. For a moment I do not understand what he means. Then I look at the image. The building in the photograph is unmistakable. Danielle's clinic. Why? I ask. They are trying to confirm you survived the shooting. Someone remembered the car that stopped there that night. A cold realization spreads through me. I lean back in my chair slowly. And the staff? They do not know who you are. But that will not matter if the wrong people start asking questions. The problem becomes obvious immediately. Danielle helped me without knowing anything about my world. That means she also has no protection from it. Put men near the building, I say. Min Jae raises an eyebrow slightly. Visible? No. Quiet. Within a day, 2 of my people begin watching the area from a distance. Cameras appear in places where they can monitor the street without attracting attention. Another man starts parking his car outside Danielle's apartment building every evening. None of them approach her. None of them speak to her. They simply make sure nothing dangerous reaches her door. For several days everything remains quiet. Danielle continues her work as if nothing has changed. But she is far more observant than most people. A week later I return to the clinic again, this time during the afternoon. The waiting room is nearly empty. Danielle is reviewing patient files behind the counter when I enter. You again, she says. Her tone is not annoyed. It is simply factual. I thought I should check whether the wound was healing properly, I reply. She gestures toward a chair in the examination room. Sit. While she inspects the stitches she speaks without looking up. You heal fast. I have experience. That sounds concerning. Her calm sarcasm almost makes me smile. But then she sets the medical instruments aside and folds her arms. Can I ask you something? She says. You can try. Why is the same gray sedan parked outside my apartment every night? The question arrives so directly that for a moment I do not answer. Danielle studies my face carefully. And why did a man pretending to read a newspaper spend 2 hours across the street from this building yesterday? I should not be surprised that she noticed. Still, the precision of her observations impresses me. They are there for your safety, I say. My safety from what? From people who might think you know something about me. She leans back slightly against the counter, considering that explanation. So you are dangerous, she says calmly. Yes. And helping you created problems for me. Yes. Instead of reacting with fear, Danielle sighs quietly. You could have told me that sooner. I preferred not to involve you. She looks at me again, this time with a different kind of curiosity. What exactly do you do, CO? The way she asks the question tells me she already understands the answer will not be simple. For a moment I consider lying. It would be easier. But something about Danielle makes dishonesty feel unnecessary. I run certain operations in this city, I say carefully. That is vague. On purpose. She studies me for several seconds, then shakes her head. You are the most polite criminal I have ever met. I did not say I was a criminal. You did not have to. The quiet confidence in her voice is strangely reassuring. She is not impressed by power, and she is not intimidated by danger. Danielle reaches for a cup of coffee on the counter and takes a sip before speaking again. You know something interesting, she says. What? When you first came through that door bleeding, I assumed you were someone important in a bad way. And yet you still helped me. Of course. Why? She gives the same answer she did the first time. Because you were bleeding. I look at her for a long moment. In my world, loyalty usually comes from fear or money. Danielle offers something else entirely. As I leave the clinic that afternoon, I realize something unsettling. For the first time since I built my empire, protecting someone feels more important than expanding it. Danielle's question stays with me long after I leave the clinic that afternoon. What exactly do you do, CO? Most people who ask that question already know the answer they expect. They want confirmation of rumors or stories they have heard from someone else. Danielle's curiosity feels different. She asked because she wanted the truth, not because she feared it. That difference matters more than I expected. For several days I avoid returning to the clinic. My men continue watching the building and her apartment from a distance, making sure no one from the rival group approaches. The conflict that began at the harbor is still unfolding across the city. Several of their operations have already disappeared after my people paid them quiet visits. Normally that would end the matter quickly. But the leader of that group, Kang Dae-sung, is stubborn enough to believe he can still reach me. One evening Min Jae walks into my office holding a phone in his hand. His expression is serious. They have started asking questions about the nurse, he says. A slow anger spreads through my chest. What kind of questions? Where she works. Where she lives. Whether she spoke to the police after the shooting. I stand up from the desk and walk toward the window overlooking the harbor. The city lights reflect across the dark water in long streaks of gold and white. They believe she treated you that night, Min Jae continues. And they are trying to confirm it. For a moment the room is completely silent. Then I turn back toward him. Move the security closer. You think they will try something? I know they will. The next night I return to the clinic again, but this time I arrive after closing hours. Danielle is finishing paperwork behind the counter when I walk in. She looks up immediately. You have interesting timing, she says. I needed to talk to you. That sounds serious. It is. She sets the clipboard aside and crosses her arms. All right, she says. Go ahead. For a moment I consider softening the explanation. But Danielle deserves honesty. The people who shot me are still looking for answers, I tell her. And they think I might have them. Yes. She processes that information calmly. Too calmly. Should I be worried? She asks. Yes. The word hangs in the room. Danielle exhales slowly and leans back against the counter. You should have told me earlier, she says. I was trying to keep you out of it. Well, that did not work. No, she studies my face carefully. Exactly how dangerous are these people? They are not the kind who stop once they begin looking. And you deal with them how? Usually by ending the problem. Her eyebrows rise slightly. That sounds comforting in a terrifying way. Despite the tension, I almost smile. You should stay somewhere else for a while, I say. Danielle shakes her head immediately. I have patients here. This is not negotiable. Her expression hardens. You do not get to decide where I live. For a second we simply stare at each other. Then she sighs. You really are used to controlling everything, aren't you? It keeps people alive. And sometimes it pushes them away. The comment lands harder than I expected. Before I can respond, a loud crash echoes from the front of the building. Glass shatters somewhere near the entrance. Danielle freezes. What was that? I move instantly toward the hallway leading to the back exit. Stay behind me, I say quietly. Footsteps echo in the waiting room outside. More than one person. My phone vibrates in my pocket at the same moment. Min Jae's voice comes through as soon as I answer. Boss, 3 men just forced their way into the clinic. I know. We are 2 minutes away. 2 minutes is too long. The door to the waiting room swings open and a man steps inside holding a handgun. His eyes scan the room until they land on Danielle. Found her, he says. The second he lifts the weapon, I move. The first blow knocks the gun from his hand. The second sends him crashing into a metal cabinet beside the wall. Another man rushes forward from behind him, but I am already moving again. The fight is short and brutal. When the last man collapses against the floor, Danielle is staring at me in complete silence. Blood drips slowly from a cut across my knuckles. You are not exaggerating, she says quietly. No, outside, sirens begin approaching as my people arrive. Danielle looks from the unconscious men on the floor back to me. You should tell me the truth now, she says. I wipe the blood from my hand with a cloth from the counter and meet her eyes. The truth is simple, I say. I run the Korean underworld in this city. She studies my face for several seconds. Then she nods slowly. That explains the gunshot. In the days that follow the attack at the clinic, the city becomes quieter in a way only people in my world understand. The men who came after Danielle disappear from the streets one by one. Some leave the city. Others simply stop answering their phones. Kang Dae-sung learns the lesson that every rival eventually learns. Some lines should never be crossed. Hurting the people around me is one of them. My organization restores order quickly, but something inside my life has already shifted in a direction I did not expect. Danielle returns to work the very next day as if nothing unusual happened. When I arrive at the clinic that afternoon, she is checking a patient's blood pressure while calmly giving instructions about medication. The same quiet professionalism I saw the first night is still there. When the patient leaves, she looks at me across the room. You look like you slept about 2 hours, she says. That sounds accurate. You should sit down before you pass out. I take the chair beside her desk, noticing again how small the clinic feels compared to the offices and buildings I usually occupy. Danielle pours 2 cups of coffee from a small machine near the wall and places one in front of me. So, she says, you run the Korean underworld. That is one way to describe it. And the men who broke in last night were part of that world. Yes. She considers this for a moment, then nods. That explains why you were bleeding on my table the first time we met. Her calm reaction still surprises me. Most people would have walked away the moment they understood who I was. You should probably stay away from me, I say quietly. Why? Because my life brings danger with it. Danielle leans back in her chair and studies me carefully. You warned me about that already, she says. And yet you still showed up here again today. I have no answer for that. She continues watching me for several seconds before speaking again. You know something interesting about you, Seo? What? For someone who claims to be dangerous, you spend a lot of time worrying about other people getting hurt. The comment catches me off guard. That is called responsibility, I reply. It sounds more like humanity. I looked down at the coffee in my hands, thinking about the chaos that followed me into this quiet clinic. For years I believed power was the only thing that kept me alive. Power built my network. Power controlled my enemies. Power protected everything I owned. But the truth is much simpler than that. The night I was shot, none of that power mattered. What saved my life was a nurse who refused to let a stranger die on her table. Danielle watches me finish the coffee before standing up. Well, she says, returning to her work. Try not to get shot again. I do not want to make saving you a regular habit. I almost laugh. For the first time in years, the future does not feel like another battlefield waiting to happen. Instead it feels uncertain in a way that might actually be worth exploring. Because sometimes the person who saves your life does more than stop the bleeding. Sometimes they remind you that you are still human. Sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen in the quietest places. Not in a boardroom, not in a gang war, not in the shadows where power and fear rule the streets. For me, it happened in a small clinic with bright lights and the steady hands of a nurse who refused to let a stranger die. Danielle Brooks did not care about the empire I built or the reputation that followed my name through the city. She saw a wounded man and chose to save him. That simple decision changed more than one life. It reminded me that beneath power, money, and violence, there is still something human worth protecting. If this story moved you or made you think about redemption, loyalty, and unexpected love, take a moment to support the channel. Please like this video, subscribe for more dramatic stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me honestly, if you discovered the man you saved was a mafia boss, would you walk away or stay and try to change his world?